Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Inshallah, I'll continue with a short segment from Imam al-Nawawi's Etiquette with the Quran, at-Tibyan fi adabi hamalat al-Quran. We've arrived at page 42 on a section where Imam al-Nawawi talks about the need for having humility and pondering when we recite the Quran. And he says, at the beginning and during recitation, one's state should be that of humility and reflection. There is boundless evidence for this, very well known and too obvious to be mentioned here. And it's also something that he's mentioned several times already in at least two places in what we've read in the past. And he's also mentioned the need for us to choose a place when we recite that is clean and quiet and relatively distraction-free, which would also help facilitate being able to recite in this way. And if you recall, when he talked about how you should sit, he said that you should sit as though Allah is watching you, and you should sit as though you're about to receive a message from your Lord. Okay, so this is how you should approach your recitation. Quiet, distraction-free place with sincerity, your heart and your mind free of other distractions. And as you recite, you should be pondering what it is that you're reading and reflecting upon it. Okay, and he goes, the state is the sought after objective through which breasts are opened and hearts are illuminated. And I think I've mentioned a few times that our relationship with the Quran should be somewhat interactive, where yes, you're reciting it, but your recitation of the Quran also has an effect on you as you recite it. And the way, one of the steps or one of the things required to do this is that you approach it with this humility. And inshallah, if you put into practice the things that Imam al-Nawawi has mentioned already and will be mentioning over the next few days, then your relationship with the Quran will take quite a big change, where it ceases being just you repeating what you recite, and instead of you working with the Quran, it turns into a relationship where the Quran is doing a lot of work on you. Okay, so Allah Mighty and Majestic said in Surah An-Nisa, will they not reflect upon the Quran? So here we have a verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is indicating that we should be reflecting upon the Quran, unlike those who do not. And then he says in Surah Sad, a book that we have sent down to you full of blessing, that they may reflect upon its signs. So both of these verses indicate the praiseworthiness of reflection. And they also hint at the blameworthiness of reading without any sort of reflection. The hadiths concerning this topic are numerous, and the sayings of the Salaf are well known. And once a number of the Salaf spent the night reciting a single verse, pondering and repeating it until the morning. And a number of them were overwhelmed when reciting it, and some of them actually died. Okay, so we have Imam al-Nawawi here telling us that it was in fact a habit of the earliest generations of Muslims to repeat a single verse over and over again. And I do remember later on in the Tibyan, he's even going to bring, I think, a statement where one of the wives of the Prophet did this. Peace be upon him. Okay, so some of them would reflect and recite a single verse throughout the night. Why would they repeat it? Why would they repeat it? So that they could think about it each time as they repeat it. And he said a number of them were overwhelmed when reciting it, and some of them actually died. So there are other cases that have been reported through history of people who either were struck unconscious and fainted from the enormity of what they were reading, and there were some people who actually died because of it. And this might seem kind of strange, right? So Imam al-Nawawi is going to bring us some proof for it. He says, related that Bahaz ibn Hakim said that the noble successor, Zurar ibn Awfa, may Allah be pleased with him, led them in the morning prayer. And he read from Surat Mudaththir until he reached the passage, "For when the trumpet sounds, surely that day will be the day of distress." And this is a verse that refers to the second blowing of the trumpet, the day when all of the dead will be resurrected from their graves. And when that happens, then the end of this world is about to take place. But worse yet is our judgment is coming that much closer. And it's a day where none of us should feel secure. So someone who reads this verse and ponders it is quite likely to be worried about the horrors of what might be in front of them. Okay, so when he reached that verse, he fell to the ground dead. And at this point you might say, oh, but wait, this is just like hearsay. This is secondhand information. Bahas said, I was among those who carried him. Now, why this last line is significant to us is that the person who reported the report not only witnessed it, but he was one of the people that carried the person to their grave. And when someone has a direct personal involvement with an event, we're going to place more importance and authority on what they tell us about the event than someone who wasn't there at all and only heard it through other people. So Imam al-Nawawi, as we know, was trying to keep things concise in this book, so he's only going to mention the things that might not be readily known to everyone and might need a little bit more backing. So he gave us an example of one person who died from reciting the Quran. Ahmad ibn Abi al-Hawari, may Allah be pleased with him, the splendor of Syria, was just as Abul Qasim al-Junayd, may Allah grant him mercy, had said. Junayd being the well-known scholar of both the exoteric and the esoteric sciences. Okay, he said about him, when the Quran was recited to him, he would cry out and faint. And Ibn Abi Dawood said that Al-Qasim ibn Uthman al-Ju'i, may Allah be pleased with him, would scold Ibn Abil Hawari for this. And al-Ju'i, one of Damascus's outstanding hadith specialists, whose superiority is put before Ibn Abil Hawari, said, Abul Jawza, Qais ibn Habtar, and others likewise scolded him. So they scolded him for crying out while he was reading the Quran. And so that he cried out, even though he was this wonderful scholar, and he shows that people can have this like uncontrolled emotional response when they read the Quran. Okay, and I, meaning Imam al-Nawawi, say that it is correct not to scold them, except for someone who admits having behaving this way artificially, and Allah knows best. Now, we're going to read later on where Imam al-Nawawi talks again about crying while reading the Quran. So my hunch is that they might have been scolding him because it was either artificial, which I don't know, or it might have just been because he got out of control in public, and it's something that should have been done in private. Okay, so Ibrahim al-Khawas, may Allah be pleased with him, the noble master of spiritual gifts and experiences, said there are 5 medicines for the heart. Reciting the Quran with pondering, which is what this section was about, emptying the stomach, standing at night in prayer, supplicating during the last part of the night, and sitting with the righteous. So if there's going to be one big takeaway that we're going to get from this section, it's that if we are feeling that our hearts are not as good as they should be, then there are 5 treatments that we should go through, and we should select at least one, because Perhaps one won't work, but we should grab at least one of them. So the first one is reciting the Quran with pondering. So notice he didn't say just reciting the Quran, which we would hope would have a benefit, but reciting the Quran with pondering. And we've already seen from other examples in the section that, yeah, reciting the Quran with pondering can have a very tremendous effect on you. It could even be so tremendous that it causes you to lose consciousness or worse, okay? So if it's something that can bring about that amount of state, that amount of change on someone, then I would hope that it would also, and with proper reflection and care, it would purify your heart. Anyway, sorry, I'm stumbling. I'm tired still. So the first one is reciting the Quran with pondering. The second one is emptying the stomach. And there are many accounts about how the children of Adam, humanity, feels nothing worse than when they fill their stomach, because of all of the sicknesses of the heart and behavior that it causes. Okay, so emptying the stomach. So he's not talking about vomiting here, because that inducing vomiting would not be allowed. He's talking about reducing the amount of food we eat and practicing asceticism when it comes to food, which would be a great treatment for our age, because we live in an age where people are vying, they're competing with one another in putting up pictures of the cool foods that they're eating, and they compete with each other about trying really cool restaurants and new dishes and all of that. So we're in an age where eating isn't about strengthening the body so that you can perform acts of worship. Eating has become a way of competing with others in public. And the next one he mentions is standing at night in prayer. Okay, tahajjud and qiyam al-layl. These are all things that have been mentioned as very beneficial. Supplicating during the last part of the night, also because that's a time when Allah is going to be more likely to answer your prayers. And these last two were also mentioned earlier. And the last one is sitting with the righteous, seeking noble companionship. Find the most pious people, the most virtuous people, the most believing people you can, and spend time with them, because their state, inshallah, will improve yours. So he mentions that there are 5 medicines for the heart: reciting the Quran with pondering, which is what this little segment was about; emptying the stomach; standing at night in prayer; supplicating during the last part of the night; and sitting with the righteous. And also about emptying the stomach, I'm sure we can all reflect on how we feel during Ramadan. After the first few days, we start feeling our hearts are more tranquil, and they're more sober, and they're more settled, and we're not as distracted as we would otherwise. So reciting the Quran, emptying the stomach, and what could be easier than not doing something, right? That's one of the wonderful things about fasting is fasting is an act of ibadah where, other than your intention, you don't really do anything, right? It's the absence of doing something, because fasting is abstention from food and drink, fornication, astaghfirullah, intercourse, and other things that would break the fast. The next one he mentioned then was supplicating during the last part of the night, and standing at night in prayer, and also sitting with the righteous. So if we're feeling in a bad state, those are 5 things that we should immediately turn towards. And obviously reciting the Quran with pondering, just recite the Quran and try to ponder. It might not come naturally, it might take some effort, but try that. And emptying the stomach, standing at night, supplicating during the last part of the night, and sitting with the righteous. I think that I've now repeated it 5 or 6 times, and inshallah, through that repetition, these are things that will come to mind whenever we have the feeling that our spiritual state is not as we want it to be. So this is all I'm going to read today because I'm still a little bit tired. And inshallah, I'll be back tomorrow. Until then, you can review what we've done and inshallah put some of it into practice. Let's all inshallah spend some more time trying to recite the Quran today, pondering what it is we're reading. And may Allah open our hearts and may He increase the impact that the Quran has on us as we read it and increase our relationship to both the Quran and to Him. Ameen.